Woman in the Yard is the latest Blumhouse horror movie following a family who just recently moved into their farmhouse. Unfortunately, this family has just dealt with the loss of their father, and in the midst of their grief, a woman in the yard appears, beginning to haunt them for the rest of the day. And that's all. Putting aside any spoilers to you guys, this will be a spoiler-free review for the most part. I will put a timestamp in the description, and I'll make it very clear, but at the end of this video, I think I gotta talk about some spoilers with this movie, because Woman in the Yard has become one of the most controversial Blumhouse movies in recent days. Yeah, if you look up right now, the Rotten Tomatoes score, and even the audience score, it is crazy low. It was so low, in fact, I thought maybe I'll just skip out on this one. I really didn't feel all that interested from watching the trailers. It honestly looked like another dull, unimaginative Blumhouse horror movie, and I've just sat through enough of those. But as I started to see some of my mutual movie friends go out to see this movie, I was noticing a trend of people who love this movie and people who absolutely hate it. And I don't know, whenever there's a weird divide like that, I'm curious to see what side I'll end up on, so bought a ticket all late because there wasn't any press screenings for this, which should have been kind of a red flag that Blumhouse didn't seem to have the most faith in this. Sat down, honestly expecting for myself to hate it and being like, hey, I'll get a good rant video out of it, title it something crazy, and the views will come pouring in. I might be in the minority of not hating this movie. Yeah, Woman in the Yard turned out to be an interesting surprise. And you know, when I go into a movie and I end up liking it when I thought I was gonna hate it, I'd probably use a term like a pleasant surprise, but this movie and its subject matter is not pleasant. And that's where a part of me is compelled to almost warn you and let you know, if you're interested in this movie, that there is just some triggering subject matter in this movie, and I totally understand now why a lot of people just were not jiving with this film. If you want to know exactly what the subject matter is that kind of gives away a big chunk of this movie, then just wait till I get to the spoilers of this video. But alright, let me get into the positives of this movie. I actually think this isn't a dull or unimaginative Blumhouse movie. When I say that, I think about movies like Night Swim, Imaginary, or most recently Blumhouse's AI horror movie Afraid. Like, those were just paint by the numbers, felt like they were thrown into a machine of a basic formula, spat out, and they were just a slog to get through. I think the director of this movie, who I'm gonna butcher his name, Jaume Collet-Serra, who's actually directed some pretty underrated horror gems, Orphan and 2005's House of Wax, along with other notable works that people either really like or just kind of don't get into. I think he actually brings a pretty unique visual style to this movie. It's not anything groundbreaking, but there was a lot more effort put into the camera angles, some of the visual cues and scares of this movie. I thought they were above average for what most Blumhouse horror movies turn out to be. One of the things I actually really liked about this movie is his creative use of shadows in the film. That hasn't been a new thing in a lot of horror movies. There's been entities that use shadows and figures in the dark to kind of scare you, but at times in this movie I thought, wow, that's actually really creative. And even branching off that point, this is a one location kind of movie. It all takes place in the course of one day in one farmhouse. It's something that you would probably get pretty bored of with its scenarios and situations, but I honestly was never bored throughout this movie. I was pretty glued in to what is going on, who is this woman in the yard, what's happening, and a lot of that is because of the performances in this movie. I think the family, from the mother, the son, and the daughter, whether you like them as characters and they don't come to annoy you, because again, this is a family dealing with a loss of a parent. You have the teenager who's rebelling and the mother who's really dealing with that depression and grief, but trying to push forward just to continue living her everyday life. They're not perfect people. They're gonna make decisions that make you kind of judge them or make you go, wow, okay, that's a choice. But it's all, again, I think, through the lens of, hey, they're dealing with a loss, and this is how the movie is choosing to represent that. So I was honestly in line with a good chunk of this movie. I was halfway through this movie going, okay, so something crazy must happen now or towards the end for all these crazy negative reviews and people calling it one of the worst Blumhouse horror movies. And then things did start to reveal itself. But I'm gonna be honest with you, and this is a situation also where it's more of your personal preference. It's more of what you've lived through in your life. I don't think this is the kind of horror movie where you can watch and then tell someone, you just didn't get it. That's why you don't like it, buddy. I get it. I get it. So I'm right, you're wrong. No, this is definitely going to be more about how you personally feel about that subject matter. And maybe this isn't the right word to use, but I felt like this movie took a bold, risky approach, had a little bit of guts, and went there and tackled some subject matter that a lot of movies would just kind of glide over, or maybe not even try and dig that deep in. Once it started getting revealed what the woman in the yard actually was, and what was happening to this family, and the mother in particular, I was kind of taken aback, and I was like, yeah, I don't think Blumhouse is gonna do this the most tasteful way. But as the story continued, and even as we got to the end, although there is some imagery that is a little difficult to look at, I couldn't help but to feel a little like, okay, Plum, you took it. Some people are gonna like this, some people really not gonna like it, but you took that gutsy approach, and I'd rather have that than Imaginary Night Swim or Afraid. So before I go into my spoilers and the things I'm seeing some people say and think about with this movie, let me go into some of my negatives, because like I said, very sensitive subject matter to tackle, and at times the movie is just slightly sloppy and messy in its approach. Once it's revealed what the woman in the yard is, then you think back to situations and things that happen in the movie, and you go, okay, if that's what the woman in yard is, then that scene doesn't make sense. Like, that logic kind of falls apart. And if you really try to hone in on the logic of a supernatural horror movie, I think you're just going to talk yourself out of liking it. So there's that. I also don't think you should expect that this is kind of a traditional horror movie in the sense that, oh, it's going to scare you. These jump scares going to get you frightening. It's got those couple of cheap jump scares where, you know, it's real quiet and then something pops out and the music blares. Cheapest form of jump scares. Couple of dream sequences thrown out too, and I'm just not a fan of dream sequences. I'm like, why fake me out? Just give me what's actually happening. But although it's not going to be a beloved traditional horror movie, I think this is a really solid psychological horror movie, because it is a movie that messes with the mind and more of an attack on your emotions. And to some people, they like psychological horror. Some other people don't. They want to just see some straight up gory stuff. So now I'm going to get into my rating card, and once the rating card is over, spoilers are going to begin. So for the woman in the yard, I'm going to give action 1.5 star. It's in one location. It is mainly these people trying to deal with it. I think though, although not a lot of action is going on and the supernatural stuff happens few and far in between, the camera work and the way it's shot by this director makes it interesting. Comedy in the movie, I'm gonna give it 0.5 star. This is not really a funny movie, not a lot of jokes throughout, and once you realize the actual subject matter, you don't want this to be a comedy. Drama in the movie, I think I'm gonna give it 3.5 stars. I think it's a pretty bold choice and a risky story to tell, and once it was all coming together for me, there was a part of me that kind of respected what they were attempting to tell. But I am not gonna argue with anybody who did not like this movie or thought it was in poor taste. Very much in your right to feel that way. Horror in the movie, I am going to give it 3 stars. Like I said, it's not a traditional horror movie in the sense that you will be freaked out or scared through the course of some of these jump scares or even the visuals involved with the woman in the yard. It's more the way the movie leaves you feeling at the end. And once you know everything that's happened, you'll kind of almost have a sick, nauseating feeling. And I think that's pretty scary when a movie can do that to you. Suspense the movie, I will give it 3 stars. I think there's a lot of times here where you are just wanting the answers and trying to figure out what is happening. But I think then some people will check out once they realize it. Casual moviegoers, due to the subject matter, I'm going to give it a C-. This is going to be a pretty hard one to recommend to grandma or your coworkers. This is more a movie that you maybe recommend to someone you're extremely close to. Cinephiles, I'm going to give it an F. I think the one location and non-traditional scares is just going to turn off some people who just want some of that basic horror from Blumhouse. And critically, I'm going to give it a C+. And that more just because it could have really have landed this powerful message if maybe some of its story elements were a little bit more straight together, but because it's a little messy, there's a bigger fallback in the subject matter you're tackling. Because of this, I do still want to recommend the movie to you, but I cannot tell you to go out in theaters. I think Woman in the Yard is more a movie you rent or stream at home.
That'll do, Donkey. That'll do.
And again, that rating is more because it's just hard. I don't know how you feel about the subject matter in the movie, so I can't really say, hey, go watch this in theaters. I still recommend you give it a shot, but maybe it's best for you to take that shot in the comfort of your home. So, wow, that was a poor choice of words once you find out what the movie is. But okay, getting on to spoilers and what this movie is actually about. So you find out early on that they lost their dad through a car accident. The mom is in crutches. The kids are just trying to go about their day. They're living in this farmhouse that is a fixer-upper, so it's got some issues to it. And once the woman in the yard starts appearing and things begin happening, it's then revealed through the course of the movie that the woman in the yard isn't a demon or even a supernatural entity. It's more the mother's manifestation of her grief and want to take her own life. That's the subject matter being tackled in Woman in the Yard, suicide. And yeah, I can totally see why that is triggering, why that's upsetting, and why some things that happen in this movie could maybe be interpreted in a way where you think the movie at times is being pro taking your own life. Because once the movie gets to that final act, I want to say the last 10 minutes of the movie, and it's become very clear at this point, that's what the woman in the yard represents. Because early on in the movie, the mom gets out of her bed, grabs her crutches, and says to herself, give me the strength, give me the strength. And you think that's her saying, well, give me the strength to continue on, to live this day, take care of my children, and do what I need to as a parent. What you later find out is she was actually telling herself, give me the strength to this be the day that I end it all. And so that's why the woman in the yard appears and tells her, today is the day. It's like, you want the strength, you want that help for that? I'm here to make that happen. And there is a real crucial and I think pretty powerful scene that I do think is slightly being misinterpreted, where we get to the end of the movie. We know now what's happening, and the woman in the yard is having a conversation with the girl who, again, is just basically her. She is the woman in the yard, even though it's her manifestation. And that's why I also think it's very clever, the uses of shadows, because that represents her shadow, her dark side, the thing she can't escape from that's always there and looming to just end it today, because she can't handle the loss and everything going on with trying to take care of her kids. And so there comes a point where the mom is like really starting to lean to wanting to do it, going okay and being through with it. And she asks the entity, the woman, are my kids going to be okay? And the woman then lights a lighter, shows kid pictures of her children that then turn into their future selves. Her little boy turns out to be a doctor. Her little girl goes on to graduate college. And the entity promises her that, yeah, your kids are going to be fine. In fact, they're going to be better off without you. And that's really where I'm seeing some people super triggered, super angry with this movie, because it's like, whoa, that is crazy for a movie to tell you, yeah, do it, because these people will be better off without you. And I don't think that's what the movie's telling you, that there's a layer and a nuance to it. To me, the way I interpreted that scene is that is the justification. That is what a person who thinks that tells themselves. When you're on the verge of wanting to do that, you tell yourself, everybody would be better off without me. You're not thinking, oh, my dad's going to be hurt, my brother will be upset. No, people who think like that think to themselves, in fact, everybody will be better. And that's what the entity was showing her. And that's not really what will happen. We don't know if the kid will be a doctor, if the girl will graduate from college. She couldn't even put an R the right way. That's me trying to keep things light. No, that's what that darker half, that's what that shadow does to you. It makes you lean on that and think that's the best choice. And that's why I found that scene so powerful and made me go, dude, I can't believe Blumhouse is attempting to put this on screen. Because then we do get to a scene where the mother sends the children off. She's like, go to the neighbor's house. She goes back to the shed, puts a gun right to her mouth, and you see the woman in the yard help her, put it right up to her face. It's honestly pretty dark. And there was a part of me that's like, okay, if they show the gun going off or that's how the movie ends, then yeah, I don't think I could support or really talk about this movie, because that's just such a dark, unfortunate message. But pause on that for a sec. So right when you think she's about to do it, though, her kids come back. She doesn't do it. They hug. They go back into the house. And the kids even say, what if the woman comes back? And the mom responds with, don't worry, if she comes back, I'll be ready and I'll know how to fight. Essentially saying if her urge to want to take her life comes back, which is a never-ending battle with some people, she'll have the strength to keep fighting and keep living another day. And when I saw that ending and heard that line, I was like, okay, good. That's the message you need to be sending. I like that. And then it continues on and goes a little bit ambiguous. This is kind of where then you can interpret the movie how you'd like. Because then we zoom in on a painting that the mother was doing, and it is a photo of the woman in the yard. And the mom, whose name is Ramona, spelled her name with an R backwards. And the R being backwards was a thing that was recurring throughout the movie with her daughter making them that way. And there was even a scene where she walks through a mirror almost like she's walking onto the other side. Not just that, but the movie zooms out and shows you that they ended up naming the house Iris Heaven, which was a sign that was not there at the beginning of the movie, almost implying that the mother did end up doing it. She is now in her heaven, in her paradise. Her grief is over, and she did actually take her own life. That is a very dark ending. And again, it's something so hard to want to justify or support. Because again, I think that's the wrong message to be sending to people. But I think there is a way you can look at it ambiguous and kind of take appreciation with both sides. You have the moment where you're like, okay, she didn't do it. She fought and she says she's going to continue fighting. The happy ending happens. And then you get what unfortunately doesn't happen. People do lose that battle. People do end up doing that. And that, again, that's where I slightly applaud them for attempting to tackle that. That's what movies should be, right? Is pushing that boundary, sometimes making us uncomfortable and bringing to light subjects that maybe aren't the most pleasant. And I thought they did it in a semi-tasteful way with it being ambiguous. If they did it the way where they just flat out shoot the gun, the light went off and made it so obvious she did go through with it, then that's just like, okay, then there's no art to that. The ambiguous way where you can choose how you take it is left up to the viewer who maybe is suffering with that. And look, even if you don't agree with my interpretation, you have a different one, or you're someone that hated it, still look at the conversation we're having and the way we're talking about this movie. It is still a much better conversation than what we've had with Night Swim, Imaginary, all those other movies. At least there is something to discuss here. I don't think every Blumhouse movie should be like this, but I don't mind them maybe being more risky and going against the grind and not doing general topics that end up becoming the most boring horror movies. On that point too, I guess with the spoilers, here's also when I talk about some illogical. So once you find out that the woman in the yard is the manifestation of the mother's want to end her own life, then the scenes where the kids interact with the woman in the yard, have full-on conversations with her, that's where it does fall apart a little bit, especially also the moments where the woman in the yard has like making things move around in the house, all supernatural style. It's like, okay, so which is it then? Is it a thing inside the mom's head, or is it an actual entity? And it felt like the movie was doing both, and that's where it felt sloppy. There's also some unfortunate storylines that I don't think got complete closure, because although the mom lost her husband, they reveal in the backstory that they were on the verge of divorce. They were ready to call it quits, and the mom was just wanting to leave. And that's actually when the woman in the yard first appeared for her, is when she's driving the car that caused the accident, meaning that's the first time she had that thought to end it, and maybe she purposely caused the accident because she just wanted to end it there. But they again never really go back to that like struggle. She just ends up grieving the husband more, which I guess is still possible even if you had one fight with your loved one, right? So I don't know. To me, it's not a movie I hate. Again, I don't say I love it, and I can't even super recommend it, but I do think it stirs up an interesting conversation, and to some people, it's gonna hit them. They'll be able to relate to it, and maybe they'll come out with a happy message. But to other people, they'll think it's in poor taste, and they think this was a pretty disgusting movie, and you're in your right to feel that way. I'd love to know your guys' opinions on Woman in the Yard. I was not expecting this to be that kind of movie. Please tell me your interpretation, what you liked, didn't like. Love to hear it all down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at 3C Films, or on TikTok at 3C Films. But as always, I'm Chris,